This may be interesting because Matt in Indiana has an equation that may demonstrate God. So here we are back to something where, I don't know, Matt, is reality math?
It essentially is. Can you hear me fine?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so I've been trying to figure out an argument because people say you can't prove God with math, and I feel as though that math is a language that can demonstrate that in a way, and it is an incomplete equation, and I think you'll understand why after it starts.
Okay, so can I just ask, are you agreeing, do we agree on a definition of math? Mathematics is the study of numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
I understand that there's no essential God variable,
right,
in the sense of like number, because in my opinion, it's a concept, and so, may I start on it?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. If the supernatural or God, like basically what people are believing in, can be brought into a variable such as B, or say Z, B equals 0, Z equals 1, and it becomes an equation add-on that is plus 0, minus 0, multiplied by 1, or divided by 1, because we have to have a null hypothesis to start at. So
okay. You're saying if God was one of these numbers, or if God was, I don't know, are you just defining God as a number? Because if you're going to do that, you're just going to define God into existence, and
this
it's going to be a circular argument.
Of showing that if people want to show that if they want to demonstrate God exists, mathematics will be one of the ways that it is defined.
But it sounds like some classic question begging, because it sounds like what you're doing is you're giving me your first premise, and what your premise is that could you give me it again? You said if God existed in math, he would be, you used
not necessarily existed in math. It's more along the lines, if he exists, he can be understood through an equation.
Well, right. So the conclusion is that a God exists, but the beginning was that, like, if you were saying if God were to be, and then you said something about a number or concept, and I'm trying to get back to what that point was, but it sounded like we were getting circular.
This bald assertion that just happened, which is if God exists, he can be understood through equations. How the hell did you reach that conclusion?
And that's why I'm trying to bounce the idea off of you, because no one really wanted to talk about it, so that's why I'm asking you guys, and I appreciate it.
I don't know how you can demonstrate that. So I mean, it's not, so math can't tell us anything about God. But I mean, if you're going to say let's put God in as a variable B,
right? That's what I was getting at.
You could do the same thing with unicorns.
But yes, I understand that.
Okay.
And so if Matt's trying to argue for the existence of a unicorn, and that's his conclusion, and his first premise is that if a unicorn existed, it would be this variable, don't you see the problem in that argument?
And I feel as though that the next explanation, sorry, my dog, would explain it in that in order to show, if you write down 2 plus 2 plus B equals X, what reason can we show delta B as in change so that X equals anything other than 4? Does that make sense?
No.
Well, the foundational thing here is that you're trying to find the observable conclusion, which you're going to do through a calculation that shows that there must necessarily be a God, but because it's the variable that we're missing in some calculation.
Right.
Oh, it's that if there is no delta or change in the equation, what happens to the plus 0 minus 0 multiplied by 1 or divided by 1 in an equation?
But plus 0 minus 0 is nothing, and times 1 and divided by 1 is nothing.
Yeah, but it's like you're sitting here saying like unicorns plus 5 equals unicorns 5, and therefore unicorns exist. And what I'm saying is that doesn't work.
No.
I mean,
I don't think that at all.
Okay.
I think that he's trying to stick God into an equation to show that God doesn't exist. Because you're
like
specifically
if someone was actually sorry.
Because if you're going with plus actually 0 times 1 divided by 1, then you're showing that there is no change here.
Yes, exactly. And that's basically the reason why I'm still an agnostic atheist.
Yes.
Agnostic.
Because God in that context cancels out from the get-go.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
So if someone wanted to convince me, they would have to
proof against God. It's not if this is a nothing.
Wait, so you said you're an agnostic atheist?
Yeah.
Yes. And this is more along the lines of that is the beginning equation where if they wanted to show that God actually does exist, they would have to show the change in B so that it becomes however different of a number.
No.
It changed from 2. Sorry?
No, none of that is true. Here, I would put my Jesus hat back on and say, you can't put God in an equation like that. It doesn't matter if you do a little math trick to try to show God doesn't exist. God exists whether you can do a little math trick or not. Hell, I can do a math trick that shows that 0.9999 repeating is equal to 1. I can do another math trick that shows that 2 is equal to 5. I can do math tricks like that all day long, but your basic flawed presumption is that God can be expressed or identified or detected and confirmed in any sort of mathematical equation. And if you're just going to put God in there as the plus 0 minus 0 times 1 divided by 1, then you have already poisoned the well by defining God in such a way that it does not and cannot impact an equation. I appreciate that. Like, I can add God to the both side of every equation that's ever been done there, show that it cancels each other out, and what do we get?
It cancels out and then remains if it's 2 plus 2 equals 4.
But if I put God on both sides of every equation, and they cancel each other out, that neither proves God nor disproves God. That just shows that math fucking works.
And it's that if God were to be understood through math, they would have to show the actual change in B.
But yes, but who's proposing that God can be understood through math?
A lot of the callers, and that's why I called.
Okay, fair enough. A lot of the callers that I disregard and don't care to talk to, because that is not a position that remotely represents it represents confusion. It doesn't represent any sizable theological construct that I'm
right.
But all right.
I appreciate it.
Try and get through a couple more. Thanks, Matt.
Yep. I will say I failed to understand part of what he was saying for like the first half of that conversation. So I'm glad he clarified that he was an agnostic atheist, and what he was trying to say was that if this was the case, he thinks it would prove a God. And I'm glad that you clarified that no, even if that was the case, it would just prove that fucking math works, right?
Yeah,
so
this is partly because you couldn't see the call screening thing where he was
right.
Atheist, and I'm like, okay, he's trying to give the absolute benefit of the doubt, which is for these people who think that God is a reality is math and that God should be part of the equation. How would that work? The problem is as soon as he assigns it a value or puts it in the 0 additive or the 1 multiplicative scenario, he's defined it as irrelevant. And that is, I mean, you wouldn't do that for anything else. You wouldn't say, hey, I wonder if there really is a statistical connection between vaccinations and autism. Let me put it in the calculation as a plus 1 minus 1 and a times 1 divided by 1. I mean, that is by definition poisoning the well. You are declaring your variable to be irrelevant, to be nothing. And so if your goal is to prove that there's not a God and you stuck him in as a variable that is a big nothing, congratulations, you proved math works, but you didn't address anything about a God.
Right.